Okay, so risk versus reward. How I love and love to hate. Luck, please favor me. Haikus aside, there is something special about succeeding in a 1 in a million situation. Yet how soul-crushing when everything lines up against you. And luck sure is a fickle mistress. Have you ever wanted to captain a ship underground, in darkness, with limited supplies, fighting off madness, and a hostile world constantly trying to pull you under? And cannibalism. Plenty of cannibalism. I feel that letting people know that Sunless Sea is a somewhat archaic genre is probably going to turn a lot of people off of it. So let me just say this beforehand. I really like this game a lot. So let's rip the bandage off. Sunless Sea. It is an old school RPG text adventure, cleverly hidden in an overhead sailing game. And when I say old school, I mean it. All of the modern qualities of life I have come to expect are gone. There are no markers telling you where to deliver something for a quest. The quests themselves do not have a summary. You either read them to know what you're trying to do, or you have no idea how to complete them. And honestly, I was overly stubborn about not pen and papering notes, which would make keeping track of what harbors offered or required different items immensely easier. The game starts off in Fallen London, an underground port which is your home base. After whatever adventures you aspire to, eventually, your goal is to make it back to London. You choose between backstories for your captain. Think classes in other RPGs, giving boosts to specific stats, and an officer for your ship. After gathering some supplies and a couple crew members, it is time to set sail. Sailing in Sunless Sea is very much about balancing and reserving your different resources. There is limited hold space, which will require jettisoning of things if you ever overstock your ship. The ship has hull, which takes damage from battles, and my personal favorite usage, running into things. If the hull gets to 0, you die and start over with a new captain. But you get to choose from a few options, allowing you to inherit something from this captain. Then there is crew. Crew members can also be lost during battles, but also from other, let's just call them questionable choices. If too many crew members are lost, control of the ship is severely hindered. Supplies are mainly your food stores. The crew needs to eat, and I think you can figure out what happens if the food runs out in a sailing game. And cannibalism. Plenty of cannibalism. There is also fuel to ration. While obviously, fuel is used for powering the ship, it also powers the ship's lantern, which is where the game mechanics get interesting. There is a fear meter that, as it starts getting too high, causes your character to perhaps lose their grip on reality. And while this meter is increased from a lot of different sources, one of the quickest is sailing into dark. To keep from getting too long-winded with the mechanics, dark expanse of sea, bad. Light, good. Coastline's good. The more coastline and more lights, the better. Want to reduce your fear buildup? Stay by land and in the light. And this is where the ship's lantern comes into play. The lantern allows you a source of light at all times, but this will drain your fuel supplies rapidly. And because of the limited resource space, decisions will sometimes have to be made between fuel efficiency and fear accumulation. All of this leads to some pretty intense exploration. After leaving London, the game becomes yours to play. Do you want to concentrate on some quests? Want to go exploring? Maybe sea combat is more to your liking. My biggest problem early on was trying to do everything at once. It took me quite a few trips before I realized how hard it was to amass money when limping back to London after every trip. Instead of going as far as my resources would allow, it was better to focus on a few objectives, and then return for specific supplies. There are multiple ports to find, offering their own unique options and storylines to pick from. Some are good for unique cargo, some for refilling supplies, while the storylines may offer the opportunities for permanent stat increases. And this is why I recommend taking notes. I can't tell you how many times I came across a specific item and couldn't remember which port's story could be unlocked by it. Or how disappointing it is sailing all the way across the map, realizing I forgot to pick up something specifically for that port. The different options in the ports have their own stat requirements, and based on your stats, you will be given a percentage chance of success. The bad news? I have failed into 80%, but I also succeeded in the teens, so anything that isn't 100% is truly a toss-up. I do have a few complaints about this game though. All of your trips end up back to London, because London is where you have access to upgrades, and almost all of your money will be made returning here. I feel like there could have been better synergies between other ports, allowing you to stay at sea longer. For example, commodity trade routes could have been more rewarding. Profit margins were literally in the single digits, and I valued the extra hold space more for fuel or supplies. Upgrades are also very expensive if the focus isn't directly on making as much money every trip as possible. And travel speeds are really slow, and the distance between ports can be fairly expansive. I understand that this was done to cause the player some unease, but the travel times in real time can drag on. It could also be hard to tell what was considered overhead and could be sailed under. In general, it can be difficult to see depth in 2D games, and could have used some sort of marking, instead of just using the Hall test. I feel like there is so much more to cover with this game, but getting into the specific situations, deeper into the mechanics, and covering the stories would be difficult without yammering on. So after 10 hours of playtime, which is when I started putting together this review, I ended up putting in another 7 hours. I don't know exactly what it is about this game that keeps pulling me back. Maybe because there are still so many things left for me to do. I have creatures that need slain. I have upgrades to make. I have more to explore. I have storylines to conclude. Sunless Sea is great, and even though it may be a lot to get started with, I have found myself enjoying it. While I'm normally not one to even give a chance to text-based adventures, I am quite glad I wasn't aware of this when I began, because I absolutely recommend this game. The stress of the dark, expansive sea, the hard decisions, the really hard decisions. Cannibalism. Succeeding against the odds, but accepting your fate when it is just your time to go. Every choice made has weight to it. Yet even with all the risks, the answer was always the same. Should I take another trip? Absolutely. Thanks for watching.